In the quiet heart of Renaissance Europe, when ideas could change empires, and belief could either crown you with glory or condemn you to flames, one man dared to imagine a universe far greater than the one sanctioned by authority. His name was Giordano Bruno, a philosopher, a dreamer, and a rebel of the mind. The year was 1600 in Rome's Campo di Fiori, when a crowd gathered to witness what was not just an execution, but a public performance of power. Bruno, stripped of his dignity, chained and gagged, was led to the stake for the crime of heresy. His crime was not murder, theft, or treason in the ordinary sense. His crime was thinking differently. Born in 1548 in Nola, near Naples, Giordano Bruno grew up in a world that was simultaneously bursting with Renaissance creativity and tightly shackled by religious authority. The Catholic Church was the great guardian of knowledge, but also its jailer. Printing presses spread new ideas faster than ever before, but censorship, inquisitions, and burnings made sure dangerous ideas did not survive long. From an early age, Bruno displayed a restless intellect. He joined the Dominican order, where he was exposed to the great traditions of classical and theological study. Yet even within monastery walls, his mind refused to remain chained. He studied Aristotle, Aquinas, but also Plato, Lucretius, and Copernicus. And from Copernicus, he absorbed the daring notion that the earth was not the center of the universe, but merely one planet circling the sun. For the Church, which preached humanity's central place in God's creation, such an idea was unsettling. For Bruno, it was only the beginning. While Copernicus had cautiously argued for a heliocentric system, Bruno went further, much further. He claimed that the universe was infinite, with countless suns and countless worlds. Some of those worlds, he said, must surely harbor life. Imagine this in the 16th century. A monk declaring that humanity was not unique, that creation was not neatly ordered around man, but instead an endless cosmos teeming with possibilities. To Bruno, God was not a distant ruler, confined to a heaven above earth. God was infinite, present in every corner of this vast cosmos. For him, the divine was inseparable from the infinite universe itself. This vision shattered the medieval worldview and directly contradicted church doctrine. The Roman Catholic Church of the late 1500s was not merely a spiritual authority. It was also a political power determined to crush dissent. The Protestant Reformation had already fractured Christianity, and the Counter-Reformation sought to restore unity by force if necessary. Bruno, with his writings and fiery lectures, quickly drew attention. He moved across Europe, Geneva, Paris, London, Wittenberg, debating scholars, clashing with theologians, and writing works that blended philosophy, science, and mystical theology. Some admired his brilliance. Many feared his defiance. He wrote of an infinite universe in his works like On the Infinite Universe and Worlds 1584, where he stated, "There are countless suns and countless earths, all rotating around their suns, in exactly the same way as the 7 planets of our system." This wasn't just science fiction. It was intellectual rebellion. In 1592, Bruno accepted an invitation to Venice, but it was a trap. He was denounced and arrested by the Inquisition. Soon after, he was transferred to Rome, where he remained imprisoned for nearly 8 years. Those years were not idle. He was interrogated, tortured, and pressed repeatedly to recant. The charges against him were long: denying the divinity of Christ, rejecting the virginity of Mary, believing in reincarnation, proclaiming that the universe was infinite, questioning the Trinity. For the Church, these were not merely wrong ideas, they were poison. A man who taught them risked spreading a disease of doubt among the faithful. The trial of Giordano Bruno was not just a courtroom proceeding. It was a collision between two visions of reality. On one side stood the Roman Catholic Inquisition, defenders of orthodoxy, determined to keep the cosmos small, human-centered, and manageable. On the other stood a philosopher who believed truth could not be caged. Witnesses testified, his writings were dissected, and Bruno was questioned over and over. But unlike Galileo, who would later bow under pressure and mutter his defiant words in secrecy, Bruno refused to bend. According to accounts, when his sentence of death was finally pronounced in 1600, Bruno responded with words that cut like a blade. "Perhaps you pronounce this sentence against me with greater fear than I receive it." He was not afraid to die. He was afraid only of living without truth. On February 17, 1600, Rome awoke to spectacle. Executions were public theater, meant to terrify and instruct. That morning, Bruno was paraded through the streets, stripped of his Dominican robes and dressed in a simple tunic. A wooden stake had been prepared in Campo di Fiori, the bustling square where vegetables, spices, and chatter usually filled the air. That day, the square smelled of resin and smoke. Bruno's tongue was clamped with an iron gag, preventing him from speaking to the crowd. The church feared his last words more than his flames. They knew even in death, his voice could ignite rebellion. The executioners tied him to the stake, piled the wood high, and lit the fire. The flames roared to life, licking his body, scorching his skin. His clothes burned away, his flesh blackened, and yet his resolve did not break. Eyewitnesses described a chilling scene. A man consumed by fire, yet unyielding in spirit. He did not scream words of despair. He did not beg for mercy. The gag silenced him, but his silence itself became thunderous. As the fire rose, Bruno's body twisted in agony. His skin blistered, his muscles tore, his eyes bulged from heat and smoke. And yet, within that horror, he was already becoming more than a man. He was becoming a symbol of defiance, of free thought, of the price paid when truth challenges power. When the flames finally consumed him, Rome thought they had silenced him forever. Instead, they had made him immortal. Giordano Bruno's intellectual journey eventually drew the full weight of the Roman Inquisition. After years of moving across Europe lecturing in Paris, London, Wittenberg, and Frankfurt, his writings increasingly attacked not just Aristotelian science, but the very foundation of church doctrine. He questioned the Trinity, the virginity of Mary, and the divinity of Christ's subjects that the Inquisition considered untouchable. In 1592, Bruno accepted an invitation to Venice from a wealthy nobleman named Giovanni Mocenigo, who sought Bruno's knowledge of memory arts. This invitation turned into a trap. Mocenigo, dissatisfied with Bruno's teaching, denounced him to the Venetian Inquisition. Bruno was arrested, interrogated, and accused of spreading heresy. The charges against him were vast and damning: denial of Catholic dogma, belief in an infinite universe filled with innumerable worlds, rejection of transubstantiation, the doctrine that bread and wine transform into the body and blood of Christ, questioning of key sacraments. Initially, Bruno defended himself with eloquence and persistence, arguing his case with the same fiery conviction that had marked his lectures. Yet, when his trial was transferred to Rome in 1593, his fate was sealed. For 7 long years, Bruno languished in the dungeons of the Inquisition. He endured countless interrogations, pressures to recant, and theological disputes with learned clerics. The church desperately wanted him to repent and confess error, but Bruno's stubborn spirit refused to yield. On January 20th, 1600, the final sentence was delivered by Pope Clement VIII's tribunal. Giordano Bruno was declared a heretic, excommunicated, and condemned to death by fire. The moment is recorded with chilling brevity in Vatican archives, but witnesses recall that Bruno, hearing the sentence, defiantly told his judges, "Perhaps you, my judges, pronounce the sentence with greater fear than I receive it." That single line immortalized Bruno not as a defeated prisoner, but as a martyr for truth and intellectual freedom. His ashes may have been scattered at the base of the stake, but his ideas could not be burned away. In the centuries that followed, Giordano Bruno's story became more than just history. It became a symbol of resistance against tyranny, ignorance, and the silencing of free thought. For years after his execution in 1600, Bruno's name was whispered cautiously, often in secret. The church had done its best to bury his reputation. To them, he was a heretic, a man who deserved his fate. But among quiet circles of thinkers, philosophers, and scientists, Bruno's death was a warning and a rallying cry. Every scholar who dared to push boundaries knew the price Bruno had paid. His execution became a shadow over Galileo's trial, a constant reminder of what happened to those who challenged orthodoxy. Galileo himself, when threatened with torture decades later, famously recanted his belief in a moving earth, likely remembering Bruno's fiery end. But unlike Galileo, Bruno had refused to bend, and that refusal kept his legacy alive. By the 17th and 18th centuries, Europe was moving slowly toward the Age of Enlightenment, a time when reason began to challenge dogma, and curiosity was no longer such a dangerous weapon. Philosophers like Baruch Spinoza and René Descartes admired the courage of men like Bruno, who refused to let fear control truth. And as science advanced, his vision of an infinite universe filled with countless worlds no longer seemed heretical. It seemed prophetic. When telescopes improved, astronomers peered into the heavens and discovered that stars were indeed suns. Planets orbited distant stars. Bruno's wild, dangerous idea was slowly becoming scientific fact. In the 19th century, nearly 300 years after his execution, freethinkers across Europe began to reclaim Bruno as a hero. On February 9, 1889, a bronze statue of Giordano Bruno was erected in Campo di Fiori, the very square where he had been burned alive. The statue faces defiantly toward the Vatican, hooded, somber, and unyielding, an eternal reminder that no fire can extinguish the search for truth, even today. That statue draws visitors from around the world, scientists, philosophers, skeptics, and dreamers who see in Bruno's defiance a reflection of humanity's relentless pursuit of knowledge. Bruno's story is not just about the past. It is about every voice silenced for speaking truth, every mind suppressed for daring to think differently. In a world where misinformation, censorship, and rigid beliefs still clash with free inquiry, Bruno's life forces us to ask, how much are we willing to risk for truth? What price would we pay to defend our ideas? And can society truly progress if we punish those who challenge its beliefs? Bruno's flames were meant to silence him forever. Instead, they lit a torch that continues to burn across the centuries. For centuries later, Bruno's vision remains alive. Modern science, from astrophysics to cosmology, rests on foundations he helped lay with his radical imagination. Every discovery of a new planet, every telescope image of distant galaxies, echoes Bruno's courage to say, the universe is infinite, the stars are suns, other worlds exist. He did not live to see it, but he believed it against all odds, against all power, against all fear. And that is why his story is not a tragedy, but a triumph. Bruno died in flames, but he rose in history as something greater, a symbol of intellectual bravery, curiosity, and unyielding truth. So the next time you look up at the night sky, remember Giordano Bruno. Remember the man who, in an age of fear, dared to dream of infinite worlds. Remember the price he paid so that today we could think freely. His voice may have been silenced, but his ideas still echo in every star above us. If Bruno's story moved you, don't let it end here. Share this tale of courage with others, because the fight for truth is not just history, it's our present and it's our future.